Welcome to Cody in the Cinema. Today I'm discussing the Alfred Hitchcock classic, a very good movie that I feel like should be in the same conversation with North by Northwest or Psycho or Vertigo, Strangers on a Train. I caught this playing on the Criterion channel with Hitchcock for the holidays, and I didn't really know that this was supposed to be one of his best movies. I don't know how I missed that, but I gave it a shot and I just kind of turned it on, and I found that it's one of my favorites that I've ever watched of his. And since I haven't heard as much about it, I thought I'd share my thoughts with you if you're into these suspense kind of movies, these mystery, murder, black and white, that kind of thing. And the plot is very simple, what I'll share of it without spoiling anything substantial. There's a famous tennis player, Guy Haynes, and he meets this man named Bruno on a train, and Bruno is very aggressive in trying to get to warm up to this tennis player, and eventually he suggests an idea. And the idea is that if two strangers who have never met before were to commit a murder on each other's behalf, then because they're strangers and they have no bond other than that, it would be easy to sort of cover up the murder, and it would create the perfect crime. And the motives here, Guy has a horrible wife, and she's just awful to him, and he wants a divorce. So Bruno would be taking out her, and Guy is supposed to kill Bruno's father, who he doesn't like. Okay. Now, in the process of this, Guy has been dating this other woman who he really wants to get married to, named Anne, who is the daughter of a senator. So he's like extra incentivized to get rid of his ex-wife, or his should-be ex-wife. It isn't. The author of the book version of this, Patricia Highsmith, she wrote the Strangers on a Train book, but she also wrote The Talented Mr. Ripley, which I did not know until I was researching for this video, has been adapted in a few different instances, but one of those is Purple Noon with Alain Delon, and I did not know that, and Purple Noon has been on my list, and I'll have to pick that up in the next sale. I didn't even know. And so she has all these books that have been, adapted and discussed and read. And I'm excited to check out this author just because I've even watched this movie. Now, Roger Ebert did a review of this, and he had a really interesting piece of commentary about the casting. So William Holden was originally supposed to play Guy. And that casting, he said, would not have worked out because that would have been like too much of a tough guy for how kind of weak and passive this character can be compared to the more commanding Bruno. I tend to agree with that. And as far as there are two reasons why I was really attached to this movie strongly. Okay? The first was the complexity of Bruno. On one hand, he is just kind of psychotic for even suggesting this plan, and then his part of the deal, as that's followed through, is quite terrifying. There's a whole sequence involving him and something that happens at a carnival that my Carnival of Souls fans who like that movie from the Criterion collection, if you liked Carnival of Souls, you're going to love that sequence in Strangers on a Train. Okay? You're going to love it. But also, just, he can be calculating and cold, but he's also kind of childish. At one point, he loses something he needs in a storm drain, and he's like frantically reaching for it. And he's not even that much different in terms of his maturity in that moment than Georgie from It, the book or the movie. Or the movie, I guess, because there's a Tim Curry movie. But I just loved how he could be so smooth and calculating, and then also just do really childish, immature stuff. There's another sequence where he practically assaults someone, and you're like, why did he do that? He's so immature. But there is an element to this story that always works on me. So there is a character who becomes the stalker sort of character that I really appreciate in various forms of fiction. And the best uses I've ever seen of this is in a video game, Resident Evil 4. There's a man dressed in black. Well, he's not a man. He's like a creation, and he searches around this zombie-infested police station for someone who's trying to rescue others. And that's terrifying. And I think about, in movies, I think about It Follows, the succubus that always walks closer and closer to its victim, changing forms. The scene in the school where there's like this old woman hospital patient looking succubus, that's terrifying. And one of the characters in this stalks another character in a similar way, sort of. It's not supernatural, but there are some truly terrifying scenes. Like one character is riding in a vehicle and sees the stalker like up on the steps of one of the buildings in DC. And I go to Washington, DC fairly often, and kind of thinking about this like empty building. You know, I've seen empty streets in DC in the mornings before, and like having one stalker stare at you on the steps, it's pretty creepy. Like that wasn't a really effective shot. And just beyond that, the entire cinematography, I mean, this is a brilliant looking film for Hitchcock. And as always, he makes good use of physical space. Like there's a scene where guy is yelling at his wannabe ex-wife, and they're like stuck in a small room and others are watching them, and it's claustrophobic, and you feel him getting so frustrated with her, like he can't get out. And part of that is shot from the other end of the bar. And there's a scene that is very famous where one of the characters tries to go up the stairs, and there's like an intimidating dog at the top of the stairs. And of course the camera's angled to where you see up the stairs and you see the animal. There's so many iconic shots like this throughout. And it, you know, and I talked a little bit about the carnival, but it does have some of that same energy as Carnival of Souls in terms of that black and white, shadowy, gritty, like what's going on behind the lights, behind the magic, so to speak. And since I am such a fan of Carnival of Souls, that part really appealed to me. Another famous shot, there's a tennis match going on where guys playing tennis, and everybody's like, you know, they're looking back and forth. But the stalker character that I mentioned is not looking. It's just staring while everyone else sort of turns their head. And that sense that there's always that threat of that stalker character really adds to the tension. And there's other tensions in there, right? There's the divorce part. There's whatever happens with the murders that I won't spoil because I haven't told you who gets murdered and who doesn't. But that kind of is always hanging over everyone's head. And so that's another element of conflict there as well. There were really only two pieces of this movie that I don't even know if I'd say like, but I didn't prefer. And I did want to talk about them briefly. So there is a politician I mentioned who's a senator, and I don't know why this happened, but I don't feel like there was any negative quality shown to that senator. He just didn't feel like a politician to me. He didn't feel opportunistic even. He just felt like a good person. And it's hard for me to like imagine that the politician was written that in that much of a wholesome way. It reminded me a little bit of the lawyer in All That Money Can Buy. I was like, is that believable? Wasn't for me completely. And I've been thinking a lot about the last few minutes, because the last few minutes of this film get a little close to jumping the shark in terms of how the action plays out. And in some ways, it's a great strength of the film because there's this dizzying, mesmerizing scene where a lot of stuff happens. How do you say it without spoiling it? A lot of stuff happens really fast, okay? And there's a lot of like quick circles and like motion, and it's not the most believable sequence, but it's so fun to watch, and it's really strong, visually compelling content. So it's like, you're not even that upset that it's that outlandish because it's so cool looking. And there's a great piece of stunt work toward the end. So those are small little reservations I have about the film. And I wonder for people who have seen it if you thought the same. But overall, I thought, one of the criticisms I sometimes have of Hitchcock is that I don't always feel like his characters are that fleshed out. Sometimes I feel like the characters are placeholders in the plot. But in this movie, the plot was compelling, the mystery was all there, but I thought the characters were really interesting. These are believable situations that could cause this idea of murder to even be surfacing. Now there is a murder piece that we don't understand all the motivations behind, and that actually I think works in the film's favor, but that doesn't mean like that we don't get to know the characters really well, because we do. Each of the main characters, I feel like in some form or another we're rooting for. And as I said, it has those terrifying set pieces at that carnival. Great use of water and a little rowboat. I think you're going to like that. So this really, for me, this was like a 4.5 or 5 out of 5. Like, it was a really strong Hitchcock movie. So if you haven't seen this one and you've been a fan of his other films, I would encourage you to go see it and see what you think. And I do believe you'll be pleased by it. So I made another video of North by Northwest, and that's still my favorite Hitchcock, but not a lot more than this one, just a little bit more. I really did like this one. So what did you think about the film if you've seen it? If you have seen it, leave a comment if you want. If you enjoyed the content today and you want to do me a favor and click that like button. Like buttons grow YouTube channels, as do subscriptions, subscribers. If you wouldn't mind clicking the subscriber button, I do put out quite a bit of content on here related to movies, Westerns, Criterion, anything like that. Anyway, we'll see you next time on Cody in the Cinema.